The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. This is program number 874. Coming to you on Monday, the 4th of September, 2017. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic vehicular damage to public property. But before getting into the topic, a few preliminary comments. Firstly, and as usual, my deepest condolences go out to all families which have suffered recent bereavements, particularly of the sudden kind. And then I wish to send belated birthday greetings to two persons of my acquaintance. Firstly, our Patriarch, His Excellency Edmund John, Patriarch of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Spiritual Baptist Archdiocese. The Patriarch turned 88 yesterday, Sunday, the 3rd of September. Belated happy birthday, Your Excellency. And belated happy birthday to Dr. Nicole Cupid, who celebrated yesterday as well. But she was not celebrating her 88th birthday, far from that. Hope you had a very lovely time, Nicole, as the fiancé of my son, Daniel Tambo Campbell. All right, now one more preliminary matter that I must touch upon. I didn't intend to speak on the topic, but it has gripped the attention of the world, namely the situation in North Korea. All I would say is that I hope the good Lord uses his influence on the respective leaders so that they would not lead us into war. Any war that flares up concerning the problems between North Korea, South Korea, and the United States of America and the allies of the United States of America will probably lead to the end of the world. So let us hope that wise counsels would prevail. That is all I have to say about that, except I probably should send commiserations to all the victims of Hurricane Harvey. And our hearts were broken as we saw the images on television. Whole cities underwater, people's homes flooded out. And not only that, but the threat of yet another hurricane, this time on the eastern seaboard, heading seemingly towards Florida and the states just north of Florida on the eastern side, Hurricane Irma. Let us pray that the good Lord would show his mercy on those persons who would otherwise be affected. Now I get into the topic, vehicular damage to public property. Anyone who has traveled along Casson Hill in recent days would have seen the workmen reinstalling the sidewalk barriers along Casson Hill. They started up at the top in the vicinity of Banana Man, and they're working their way right down. And those of us who live on this side of St. Vincent and Grenadines and who use that road practically every day would recall that for some time the barriers have been progressively knocked out, the concrete pillars broken, the steel railings knocked out, because there seem to be so many accidents which have taken place along that part of the Casson Hill Road. I am sure I saw an item in one of the local newspapers where an official of the government was lamenting the fact that so much money has to be spent in replacing those barriers. So I want on this program to look at what does the law provide? Whose responsibility is it when vehicles collide with the barrier and break out bits of it? Because as I understand it, it is public monies which are being used to reinstate those barriers. And we're talking about a lot of money. So the answer is to be found in the third-party insurance law. The Motor Vehicles Third-Party Insurance Risks Act, Chapter 309, because the principles governing liability for damage to private property are the same principles governing liability for damage to public property. If a vehicle runs off the road and damages someone's property, be it their fence or their house or the porch of their house, then the company which has insured that vehicle is liable to the owner of the property which has been damaged under the third-party insurance laws. Similarly, if a vehicle damages property belonging to the public, in other words, a government back wall or a side wall or a barrier, such as we have on the edge of the road along Casson Hill, then the responsibility for fixing that damaged barrier falls on the company which has insured the vehicle which collided with the barrier in the first place, causing it to be damaged. But apparently, vehicles would run into the barrier. Some of them have run right through and over it and fallen the other side, breaking out the concrete columns. Nothing happens when that damage is done. And section by section of the barrier is broken out, so that long stretches of what should be a protective barrier become defective from successive accidents. All that needs to be done is that when the traffic policemen investigate an accident involving damage to a barrier erected by the government at the side of the road, they naturally would want to take details of the vehicle or vehicles involved. And those details would involve the name of the company which has insured the vehicles, assuming the vehicles had insurance, which they really ought to have. Because as we all know by now, every vehicle operating on a road must have third-party insurance coverage to cover liability for damage to property belonging to third parties. In this case, the government would be the third party, which is responsible for looking after the public interest. So once the traffic policemen go and investigate and they realize vehicle so-and-so has damaged a section of the barrier, and that vehicle was insured by such and such company, what should follow is a letter from the governmental authorities to the insurance company saying, on such and such a date at such and such a time, vehicle number so-and-so, insured by your company, damaged this barrier. It will cost X amount of dollars to be repaired, and the government is calling on you, the insurance company, to pay that amount of money so that the barrier could be repaired. And if the insurance company doesn't in due course pay the money, the government simply takes the insurance company to court seeking damages for the destruction to the barrier at the side of the road. So that it shouldn't be left to the government to have to take money from the public purse to repair that long stretch of barrier along Casson Road or any other barrier in any other part of St. Vincent and Grenadines. Shouldn't be a public expense at all. Those monies should come from the companies which are provided third-party insurance coverage in respect of the vehicles which caused the damage to those barriers. Nothing difficult about that. So that when an accident occurs involving, among other things, a vehicle running into a barrier and damage being caused to the barrier, the government should have a mechanism or should use the mechanism which the law provides to get the cost of repairs from the relevant insurance company. Sometimes there may be a dispute as to which of two vehicles was primarily responsible for the damage to the sidewalk barrier. You may have a case where a vehicle is going up the hill, one coming down the hill, they collide, and one vehicle runs into the barrier and damages it. Now, in law, the real fault in respect of that accident may lie with the vehicle that did not run into the barrier. One vehicle could have knocked another one into the barrier. But the government doesn't have to worry about that. The government simply sues the company that has insured the vehicle which damaged the barrier, even though it was not the fault of the driver of that vehicle, and leave that driver to sue the vehicle responsible, the driver of the vehicle responsible, to be indemnified in respect of the money which it is supposed to pay to the government. The government could say, okay, since two of you are quarreling as to who really caused the accident, we are going to look to the vehicle insurers which actually caused the damage. And if you're saying it is not that vehicle, then take the other one to court and get your indemnity. But the public should be recompensed, reimbursed for the outlay in replacing that barrier. And it's very important because the barrier is put there for a reason. It's to protect pedestrians and protect vehicles from going over where the collision doesn't have the force to carry the vehicle over, where the barrier is meant to stop the vehicle going right over the edge of the road. And when the public has to wait for months, sometimes years, for a particular portion of the barrier to be restored, it means that that protection is not in place for the duration of time that everybody has to wait for it to be reinstalled. I paid attention to the method by which they are putting down the barriers, and I commend the engineering principles, because it looks to me that those barriers are going to be strengthened. They seem to be making excavations in the pavement itself and putting in steel reinforcement to reinforce the uprights. So you have an L-shaped bit of steel, part going into the upright and then part going into the sidewalk to make it stronger and less likely to collapse. That is good, but all that is costing money, for which insurers ought to be paying. Excuse me. And let me digress a bit. I saw a statement by Minister of Transport, the Honorable Julian Francis, in which he was complaining about deficiencies in the construction of the highway between Belmont and Mesopotamia. And from what he is reported to have said, it looks as if the work was not efficiently done. Fortunately, he drew attention to the fact that there were monies held back under the contract that he had planned to get his ministry or Bragsa to use to remedy the potholes which have become manifest in what is a reasonably new stretch of road. But alas, the question remains, where were the engineers of the government who were supposed to supervise the building of these roads in the first place? It is not good enough for enormous amounts of public monies to be spent building roads, resurfacing roads, and have some of the work done so defectively that before the road is in service a few months, you have serious potholes developing. I was appalled. I drove recently. I was coming from the funeral of young Mr. Max, held at the Roman Catholic Church in Mesopotamia. I had got there by going over Gome, but I decided to drive back to the Belmont side. And I was appalled at the number of massive potholes in that relatively new stretch of road. So when I read the remarks of the minister, I empathize with the minister. But I say that your officials ought to be more vigilant in supervising these constructions. I mean, it is costing the government an enormous amount of money to build and rebuild and refurbish highways. Enormous amount of money. And everybody quarrels when the roads are defective. But the government must do what it ought to do to deal with the problem at source. Let me commend the authorities and the contractors for the South Leeward Highway. It is a beautiful piece of road to drive from Kingstown to Bocoment these days. Lovely. There was a time when the road was being built when I heard and saw comments in the paper about this and that bit of road failing, but they appear to have dealt with all of that. And let me make one further comment. The yellow line in the center of that road is extremely helpful to motorists, particularly at night. And particularly those of us whose eyesight is not what it should be. By contrast, the Windward Highway ought to get a similar center yellow line. There's a big discrepancy. Beautiful yellow line in the middle of the road along South Leeward, going into Central Leeward. But there used to be a white line when the Windward Highway had just been constructed. That is obliterated, and I would beg the authorities if they could reinstate that line, but this time make it yellow, which is easier to see in the night. So to round off and get back to the topic, whenever vehicles damage public property, the law already provides a remedy to the public, namely the government should insist that the insurers of those vehicles under the third-party legislation pay for that damage. They should be consistent and it should be stern. It should be robust so that drivers don't feel, okay, you could always lick up a back wall, a piece of wall, a side wall belonging to the government and damage it and don't have to bother about that. You should bother because once you cause damage to public property and your insurance has to pay, when you go to renew your premium, the insurance company will adjust your premium given that you caused them to have to pay the government money for damage you did to public property. And that way you'll take more care. You see, people don't mind licking up and destroying things that belong to the government. Because they figure, well, that's government. No, you have to bother with that. Because, if you do damage to private property, the private owners of that property damage are going to go to a lawyer and so on. But if it's public, if it's government property, oh, no big thing. Well, it ought to become a big thing, so that drivers take as much care, ought to take as much care for public property as they take for private property. Same principles of compensation is applicable to both kinds of property under the laws on the books. But the government has to make sure it enforces the laws in respect of government property, which is public property, and do it consistently so that the drivers are made to feel it in their pocket when they go to renew their premiums. I hope that everyone will take better care of all property when they drive vehicles on the road. So that is all from this program of the Law and You, program number 874. I apologize that last week I was not able to bring a live program because I wasn't feeling too pram, you know. I feel much better this week. In fact, I'm taking a week's holiday out of my vacation, out of the summer vacation, and the High Court is closed. I still have a lot of work to do, but I've decided that this week PR is taking it easy, taking a few days holidays. So you see me springing up in my holiday shirt. All right, I look forward to being a further service to you next week, Monday, DB, for another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, and may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.